Today I'm going to throw some epoxy down. I've spent quite a bit of time this morning using some metal conditioner all over the bare metal surfaces just to get it ready for the primer. It's what the tech data sheet specified, so I like to follow them. So it's all looking pretty good. I did about 3 rounds actually, because you have to apply the metal conditioner with like a Scotch-Brite pad, and then rinse the excess acid and then dry it with an air compressor and stuff like that. So I'm pretty happy with how it's looking. I went over it, I used the air blower and made sure I blew out any moisture in between the cracks there. The joins, it definitely, you don't want that stuff sort of getting pushed out of those joints into your primer or whatever, especially for top coat, but even primer, you don't want any moisture underneath. And I finally spent quite a bit of time going over everything with some metho on a rag, and as you can see, still picked up quite a bit of junk, so should be good to go. Today my plan is to prime everything that I've welded back onto the car. I have a layer of epoxy down, and then I can put a little bit of fine filler just to make these spot welds look nice and smooth. As far as the rest of the engine bay goes, I'm going to lay the epoxy down and then go wet on wet with the primer surfacer. And for the front, which gets hidden behind the grille and stuff, I really want to put the top coat on, and these areas are all really hard to sand around, so I want to go wet on wet and put a bit of white on. I can only do things in stages because this is not my full-time job. I work on the weekends, and I sort of just want to get some colour on there. I guess, yeah, doing these jobs in stages will sort of give you a motivation to keep going. Of course, always use a respirator. I use this Sunstrom. It's really good. Make sure you pay attention to the expiry date of the gas cartridges, and when the front particulate filter gets a bit blocked up, just don't be afraid to throw a new filter in, which I'll be doing. I like to have everything set out. So I've got my gun stand, my filters and mixing cup, my gun cleaning tools, just El Cheapo there. Obviously my primers. I use an old tin here just to tip out sort of leftovers, and I clean my gun over this. I use general purpose thinners to clean my gun. Squirty bottle comes in handy. These little pourers are handy if you've got those real big tins. Mask and the high build primer that I'm using. This stuff works with obviously the top coat and the epoxy primer I'm using. It's all the same brand, and that's what I mean. Makes pouring those so much easier. And this is the gun I'll be using for primer. A Air Gunzer by Ernesto Wada. Never underestimate a good primer gun. I've learnt this most recently actually. I used to use cheap $40 to $60 ones off eBay, and after like 2 or 3 uses I just threw them in the bin. Do that a few times and you could have bought yourself a decent primer gun. And not only that, but the fact that they can lay down a nice slick coat of primer makes sanding so much easier, so I'll be using that today. As far as dry air goes, I'm going to use one of these at the airline. I also have a custom made copper water trap thing with a few little drop legs that I can remove the moisture from. Mostly the moisture comes out of the first one, a little bit from the second one, nothing from the third one, pretty much nothing from the fourth one. And I've got one of these bad boys as well. And this thing does real good. Alright, that's the epoxy done. Change of plan. I'm not going to rush this, so I'm going to let the epoxy cure, sand it back, do all the filler work that I need to do around the spot welds, and when that's done, I'll just lightly dust some more epoxy to seal those, the filler work, and then I'll put primer surfacer over the whole engine bay. So I was trying to think of shortcuts and ways of, maximizing my time, but I just want the primers to like gas out and cure properly. I don't want any solvent trapping and stuff like that, so that's what I'm going to be doing. So yeah, just means I'll be sanding a lot, but at the end of the day I can actually really hone in on the areas that are really visible, rather than not knowing whether the paint's going to cover up the sanding scratches on the metal and that sort of stuff. So yeah, do it properly, take my time, and it is warm now, so once I go back onto the Corolla next weekend, it should have had a few warm days to set up nice and start my sanding marathon then. So now, going to clean the gun. Performed quite well. I did get a few runs, but that's because the engine bay is so intricate for an old car as well, and I'm sort of a little bit out of practice in that sort of sense. So there's a few runs I have to contend with, but it is the epoxy stage anyway, so it doesn't matter. Once I remove the run and I cut back to bare metal, well, I'm going to be dusting some epoxy over areas anyway, so wherever I cut back, getting rid of those runs, I could just spray a little bit over there. So. I decided to scuff the epoxy where I plug welded to give the filler some mechanical adhesion. I'm applying filler into these areas to smooth out any imperfections from the welding and grinding and make the flanges super smooth. I will then apply more epoxy to seal up the repairs and run some seam sealer, but not as per factory, it'll actually be neater. Using the bottom of a drill bit, I'm trying to replicate the look of a factory spot weld by pushing an imprint into the filler. But due to an extremely thin amount of filler, this is good, my idea didn't work, and instead I used a carbide burr to lightly groove a divot into the top of the plug weld. So I'm here at the paint shop, gonna try and get, I think, 2 litres I reckon of Paraglazed gloss, which is PPG or Protec. But yeah, I don't have any paint codes for it. We looked everywhere, and there's a few different variations of white for, you know, a 69 Corolla. So got my fuel door, I get them to mix it up, match it to that, and yeah, it should be nice, it should be new.
Matt did say that he's happy for it to be a bright white, but I said to him I'd rather have it matched as closely as possible to the rest of your car, because who knows when you're gonna repaint the car. And if anything, with the new paint that I buy today, it'll have a code, so if he's happy with the color, well, you'd hope he'd be happy with the color, then he can use that code to buy more paint and have it close enough to be able to spray the whole car with. So yeah, that's my thinking. Well, let's go get this done. Picked up 2 liters of the paint today. They couldn't mix it up straight away because their little spectrum machine couldn't get a decent enough connection to this panel because of its curve. It was letting a lot of sunlight in. So here we are. Let's open her up. See the fresh new white paint. What's very interesting is the base color is of a Datsun, and they've obviously tinted it, brightened it to suit. Nice, a nice off-white. I mean, it's hard to tell looking at a tin of paint versus an old petrol filler cap, but it should look quite nice. Very good. And this is direct gloss PPG as well, so I'm not gonna bother with base coat and clear coat for an engine bay. This should do quite nicely.